Way of the Warrior Kid, From Wimpy to Warrior, the Navy SEAL Way, by Jocko Willink.
Chapter 20, Marc versus Goliath on the mat. My whole world changed today. I went to jiu-jitsu class this afternoon. When I walked onto the mat, there was a new kid there. He looked about my age, maybe a year older, but he was much, much bigger than me. In fact, he was as big, if not bigger, than Kenny Williamson. Really big. Just like other days when new kids show up to class, the instructor pulled the new kid aside and taught him the basics of jiu-jitsu while we were warming up and doing our basic drills for the day. The new kid's name was Jimmy. After warm-up, the instructor sat us down to go over some new moves. We spent some more time drilling those moves, and then finally it was time to roll. I did a round against the usual kids that train all the time. A round with Jeff, a round with Craig, a round with Andy, a round with Nora, and then Dean. Some of them beat me, and I beat some of them. It basically boils down to who has been training the longest or the most. The kid with the most experience will win. The whole time I was sparring with the other students, Jimmy was standing on the side, watching. Then after one of the rounds, the instructor said, "Marc, come over here and train with Jimmy, okay?" I walked over to Jimmy. Now that I was standing near him, I realized how absolutely huge he was. He was definitely bigger than Kenny Williamson. I held out my hand. Jimmy grabbed my hand and squeezed. Not crazy hard like he wanted to hurt me, but he gave it a squeeze, and I could feel how insanely strong he was. I started to get nervous. What if this big monster goes crazy and tries to hurt me? What if he doesn't know his own strength and ends up breaking my arm or my leg or my spine? My nervousness quickly turned to fear. I was afraid. I looked at the instructor and said, "Sir, he's a lot bigger than me. Maybe Jimmy should go with one of the bigger kids?" The instructor smiled and said, "You'll be fine. Now go ahead and train." I squared off with Jimmy. We slapped hands, and it was go time. Still scared, I circled around at a distance, maintaining my focus on Jimmy. Jimmy seemed hesitant too. He kind of kept looking at me like he was waiting for something to happen. I circled some more. He waited some more. I circled around him even more, and he kept waiting. Then I realized something. The reason Jimmy was waiting was because he had no idea what to do. He knew nothing. No single or double leg takedowns. No arm locks, no chokes, nothing. He had no idea how to fight. Now, me on the other hand, I was no pro, but I had certainly learned some good stuff over the last 6 weeks in jiu-jitsu class. That is why the instructor said I would be fine, because he knew that I knew jiu-jitsu. As I looked at Jimmy's face, my confidence went up, and I decided to go for it. I reached toward Jimmy's face with my hand to distract him for a moment. His eyes blinked, and he reached up to block my hand. At that moment, I shot in underneath his hands and grabbed both his legs for a double leg takedown. Almost instantly, I had my arms wrapped around both his legs. I squeezed them together as I pushed him back and to the side with my head. Unable to step back and regain his balance because my arms around his legs, and he began to fall down. He hit the mat, and I immediately got control of him and held him down. He pushed hard against me, but it didn't matter. Even though he was bigger and stronger than I was, it didn't matter. He didn't know any technique. And in jiu-jitsu, technique triumphs over strength and size. The next thing I did was move into the mount position. And as soon as I did that, Jimmy began to get wild. He bucked his hips and thrashed from side to side and finally pushed his arms straight up into my chest to try to get me off him. This is the thing people do when they don't know jiu-jitsu. And that's why we drilled it hundreds of times when someone tries to push you off. They leave their arms wide open to getting arm locked. And that is exactly what I did. In a flash, I spun around, threw my leg over his head, and sat back with his arm under my control. Once I had his arm extended, I squeezed my legs together and slowly raised my hips to apply the tension. And almost instantly, Jimmy tapped out. That was it. I had just tapped out a kid bigger than Kenny Williamson. I almost couldn't believe it. I looked at my instructor, who had been watching, and he smiled and nodded at me. Then he gave me a stern look. The stern look was to remind me to stay humble in defeat or victory and to show good sportsmanship and honorable behavior. I got to my feet, then reached down to Jimmy to help him stand up. I said, "Good job, you're really strong." He looked disappointed and surprised and said, "Well, it didn't even matter. You're really good at this stuff." "Stay humble," I thought to myself as I said. "It's just that I have been training longer than you. Don't worry, it's easy to learn, and you'll pick it up fast as long as you keep training." "Oh, I'm definitely going to keep training. Don't you worry about that." I wasn't worried at all. In fact, I was happy. Jimmy was nice, but he was also big. That meant I get to train with someone as big as Kenny Williamson all the time. The more I train, the more comfortable I will be. So I was happy that Jimmy will keep training, and I will too.